My wife lied and cheated for thrills, so I froze the accounts and left her begging for help. Thomas Marshall stood in his home office, staring at the framed wedding photo on his desk. 12 years of marriage were captured in a single moment, him in a black tuxedo, Victoria in her flowing white dress, both of them beaming at the camera. His fingers traced the edge of the silver frame, remembering how happy they'd been that day. The same frame now felt like it contained a stranger's memories. The sound of Victoria's hushed laughter drifted up from downstairs, pulling him from his reverie. Another late-night phone call. She thought he was asleep, just like every other night for the past 3 months. Thomas glanced at his watch, 11:37 p.m., right on schedule. He moved silently to his office door, leaving it open just enough to hear her words more clearly. Victoria's voice carried through the quiet house, a practiced whisper that had become all too familiar. "I miss you too." "No, he's asleep. I know, just a little longer." Thomas's jaw clenched, but he forced himself to remain still, listening. Each word was another piece of evidence, another confirmation of what he'd known for months. He pulled out his phone and opened the Notes app, adding another entry to his detailed log. October 15th, 11:37 p.m. Phone call from living room, speaking in whispers, laughing, duration 23 minutes. The entry joined hundreds of others, a digital record of betrayal that stretched back nearly 100 days. Times, dates, locations, all meticulously documented. Thomas was nothing if not thorough. He walked to the bathroom, flipping on the light. The harsh fluorescent bulbs revealed what 3 months of sleepless nights had done to him. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his normally clean-shaven face showed a day's worth of stubble. At 42, he'd always taken pride in his appearance, but lately, the stress had begun to show. The sound of Victoria moving downstairs made him pause. She was probably checking to make sure he was still asleep. Thomas turned on the faucet, letting water run into the sink. After a moment, he heard her footsteps retreat back to the living room, followed by more muffled conversation. He splashed cold water on his face, trying to clear his head. In the mirror, his reflection stared back at him, brown eyes hard with resolve. He wasn't the same man who'd stood beside Victoria at the altar 12 years ago. That man had been trusting, perhaps naive. That man hadn't known the signs to watch for, hadn't understood how easily love could turn to betrayal. The floorboard outside the bathroom creaked as he stepped into the hallway. Victoria's voice immediately cut off mid-sentence. Thomas made his footsteps deliberately heavy as he walked toward their bedroom, giving her time to end her call. By the time he slipped under the covers, the house was silent except for the hum of the heating system. 20 minutes later, Victoria crept into their bedroom. Thomas kept his breathing steady, maintaining the illusion of sleep as she moved around the room. The familiar scent of her perfume, Chanel No. 5, the same one he'd given her last Christmas, wafted through the air as she passed by his side of the bed. "Good night, honey," she whispered, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. Thomas continued his measured breathing, letting his fake snores fill the silence. The mattress dipped as Victoria settled in on her side, keeping the careful distance between them that had become their new normal. He waited until her breathing evened out before opening his eyes, staring at the ceiling in the darkness. Morning arrived with the harsh buzz of his alarm at 6. Thomas went through his usual routine mechanically: shower, shave, dress for work. Each action was performed with practiced precision, an armor of normalcy he'd perfected over the past months. Victoria was already in the kitchen when he came downstairs, dressed in a new blouse he didn't recognize. She stood at the counter, preparing coffee with the expensive machine they'd bought together last year. Her phone buzzed against the granite countertop, and she snatched it up with too much eagerness, her fingers flying across the screen. "Important message?" Thomas asked, keeping his voice carefully neutral as he reached for a coffee mug. Victoria startled slightly, as if she'd forgotten he was there. "Oh, just work stuff. You know how Rachel gets when we're approaching deadlines." Rachel, her supervisor at the marketing firm, another lie to add to the growing collection. Thomas knew exactly who the message was from, the same person she'd been talking to last night, the same person whose contact name in her phone had been changed to Rachel 2 months ago. He poured his coffee, adding a splash of cream. "Will you be home for dinner tonight?" Victoria's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around her phone. "Actually, I might have to work late. This campaign is really demanding right now." "On a Friday?" Thomas stirred his coffee slowly, watching her reflection in the kitchen window. "You know how it is in marketing," she said with a practiced laugh, the same one she used at company parties. "Everything's always urgent. Don't wait up if I'm not back by dinner." Thomas nodded, taking a sip of his coffee. "Actually, I might be home early today, around 5. The mug in Victoria's hand trembled slightly before she set it down. "Oh, that's nice. But like I said, I'll probably be late." "Right, the campaign." Thomas watched as she gathered her things, her movements just a touch too hurried to be casual. "Have a good day, Victoria." She paused at the door, her hand on the knob. For a moment, something like guilt flickered across her face, then it was gone, replaced by her usual polished smile. "You too, honey." As soon as the door closed behind her, Thomas pulled out his phone and opened the tracking app he'd installed months ago, when the first signs of her infidelity had become impossible to ignore. The blue dot showing Victoria's location began moving, not toward her office downtown, but in the opposite direction. Thomas finished his coffee and walked to his home office. He'd prepared everything meticulously, but it wouldn't hurt to double-check. Opening his laptop, he reviewed his calendar for the day. The meeting with his lawyer was set for 10 a.m. Before that, he had a final check-in with the private investigator. His phone buzzed with a text from the PI, subject heading to usual location. Photos incoming. Moments later, several images appeared on his screen. Victoria's car parked outside a familiar apartment complex, Victoria entering the building, and in the final photo, Victoria greeting. A man at the door, Daniel Cooper, 35, financial advisor, divorced, the man she'd been seeing behind Thomas's back for the past 3 months. Thomas saved the photos to his encrypted drive and headed to work. His office at Marshall & Associates Consulting was quiet this early in the morning. As senior partner, he had the corner office with a view of the city skyline, but lately the view had lost its appeal. Everything seemed dimmer now, tainted by the knowledge of Victoria's betrayal. At 10 sharp, his intercom buzzed. "Mr. Marshall, Miss Chun is here to see you. Send her in, Sarah." Thomas straightened his tie and stood as his lawyer entered the office. Rebecca Chun was a sharp-dressed woman in her 50s, with a reputation for being one of the best divorce attorneys in the city. She carried a thick portfolio under her arm, her expression professional but sympathetic. "Good morning, Thomas," she said, taking a seat across from his desk and spreading out several documents. "I've reviewed everything one final time. The house sale is complete, all assets have been transferred to your sole accounts, and the utilities will be disconnected as scheduled. Are you absolutely certain you want to proceed with this?" Thomas reached for the papers without hesitation. "More certain than I've ever been about anything, Rebecca. And the evidence of infidelity? You have everything documented?" He pulled out his phone, showing her the latest photos from the PI, along with his detailed log of Victoria's activities. 3 months of documentation, phone records, credit card statements, photographs, everything. Rebecca reviewed the evidence carefully, nodding with approval. "This is very thorough, Thomas. Most clients let emotion cloud their judgment, but you've handled this remarkably well." "I had to," Thomas said, signing the final document with a steady hand. "The moment I suspected something was wrong, I knew I couldn't confront her without proof, without a plan." "Well, you certainly have both." Rebecca gathered the papers, tucking them into her portfolio. "The new owners can take possession as soon as you give the word. The moving company is on standby, and the divorce papers are ready to be served. Are you sure about the timing?" Thomas leaned back in his chair, his decision unwavering. "Yes. Everything happens today. Victoria thinks she's in control, that she's the one calling the shots. She has no idea what's coming. Just remember," Rebecca cautioned, "stay calm when you make your move. No matter what they say or do, maintain your composure. The law is on your side." After Rebecca left, Thomas spent the next few hours finalizing details. He confirmed arrangements with the moving company, ensuring they understood the timing was crucial. He double-checked that all utilities would be disconnected by Monday morning. He even called the security company to schedule the changing of the locks. At 4:30, Thomas packed up the last of his office essentials. He'd already moved most of his important documents and personal items to his new apartment over the past week. Victoria hadn't noticed the gradual disappearance of his things, too preoccupied with her own deceptions. The drive home felt surreal, like watching someone else navigate the familiar streets. Thomas parked a block away, out of sight of the house. Daniel's red Porsche sat in their driveway, as bold and shameless as its owner. Thomas checked his watch, 4:58, right on schedule. He walked slowly up the front path, each step measured and deliberate. The house looked the same as it had that morning, but it felt different now. This wasn't his home anymore. Hadn't been for months, really. It was just a stage for the final act of his marriage. The sound of laughter drifted through the front door, Victoria's high-pitched giggle mixing with Daniel's deeper voice. Thomas took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and inserted his key into the lock. The mechanism turned smoothly, and he pushed the door open. The laughter cut off abruptly. Thomas stepped into the living room, taking in the scene before him. Victoria and Daniel sat on the couch, the same couch where they'd spent countless evenings watching movies together. Wine glasses sat on the coffee table, and Victoria's new blouse was half unbuttoned. "Thomas," Victoria jumped up, her face flushing red. You're home early." Clearly, Thomas said, his voice steady, betraying none of the emotions churning beneath the surface. Daniel stood up slowly, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. He was dressed in an expensive suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month. Well, isn't this an interesting situation, is it? Thomas looked between them, letting the silence stretch, uncomfortable and thick. Victoria's initial shock was morphing into something else, a defiant tilt to her chin, a hardening in her eyes. I suppose we need to have a conversation about this, like civilized people, Daniel added, his smirk widening. Though I think the situation speaks for itself. Thomas nodded slowly. It certainly does. Look, Thomas, Victoria said, her voice taking on that patronizing tone she used when she thought she was being reasonable. These things happen in marriages. People change. They grow apart. Daniel and I, we have something special, something real, something you and I never had. Daniel interjected, wrapping an arm around her waist. Let's be honest here. You're not exactly the most exciting person. Victoria needs more than spreadsheets and routine. Victoria leaned into Daniel's embrace, her wedding ring catching the light. It's better this way, Thomas. You should go. We can figure out the details later, but for now, just leave. The house is in both our names, Thomas said quietly, watching their reactions. You're asking me to leave my own home? Daniel laughed, the sound grating against Thomas's ears. Come on, man, don't make this pathetic. Accept that you've lost and walk away with whatever dignity you have left. Thomas looked around the living room one last time, at the photos on the walls chronicling their life together. Each image now seemed like a mockery, a record of lies. You're right, he said finally. I should go. Victoria blinked, clearly surprised by his easy acquiescence. Yes, you should. Take what you need for tonight, and we'll sort everything else out later. Thomas walked to the hall closet and pulled out a pre-packed overnight bag he'd stashed there days ago. I'll just take this for now. You can have the house. That's surprisingly mature of you, Victoria said, though she couldn't quite hide the triumph in her voice. Very generous, Daniel added, already reaching for the wine bottle. See? No need for unnecessary drama. Thomas paused at the door, looking back at them one last time. Victoria had already turned away, focused on pouring more wine. Daniel gave him a mock salute, victory written all over his face. Goodbye, Victoria. Thomas stepped outside, closing the door quietly behind him. He walked to his car, listening to their renewed laughter drift through the evening air. They had no idea what was coming. In his mind, he replayed his meeting with the real estate agent 3 weeks ago, remembered signing the final papers that morning. Thomas checked his watch as he started the car. The moving company would arrive in exactly 47 minutes. He'd given them explicit instructions, wait 1 hour after his departure, then begin clearing out the house. Everything had been documented, cataloged, and legally transferred. His phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca, divorce papers ready for service, everything proceeding as planned. Thomas allowed himself a small smile as he drove toward his new apartment. Let Victoria and Daniel have their celebration. Their laughter wouldn't last long. Sometimes revenge wasn't about dramatic confrontations or heated arguments. Sometimes the best revenge was simply letting people's actions catch up with them. The sun was setting as he pulled into his new apartment complex, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. A new day was ending, and with it, his old life. Tomorrow would bring chaos for Victoria and Daniel, but for Thomas, it would bring something else, freedom. The crystal champagne flute caught the last rays of sunlight streaming through the living room windows, sending prisms dancing across Victoria's face as she raised her glass. Her lipstick left a perfect crimson mark on the rim as she took another sip, her laughter echoing through the house that would soon no longer be hers. A toast, she declared, her voice carrying the slight slur of someone on their third glass, to new beginnings and to Thomas, who made this so much easier than I expected. Daniel Cooper lounged on the leather couch, his Italian suit jacket draped carefully over the armrest. He lifted his own glass, a self-satisfied smirk playing across his features. I have to admit, I'm almost disappointed. I had this whole speech prepared about how he needed to face reality, but he just folded. That's Thomas for you, Victoria said, kicking off her Christian Louboutin heels and letting them fall carelessly onto the Persian rug Thomas had brought back from a business trip to Dubai. Always avoiding confrontation, always taking the safe route. She stretched out her legs, resting her feet in Daniel's lap. Do you know he actually apologized to a waiter last week when they brought him the wrong order? Daniel set his glass down and began massaging her feet, his fingers working expertly against the arch. Sounds absolutely thrilling. However, did you survive 12 years of such excitement? Honestly, Victoria leaned back, closing her eyes. I think I was just comfortable, safe. Thomas was predictable. Like a well-programmed robot, wake up at 6, work until 7, watch the news, go to bed at 10, every single day. And now, Daniel's hand moved higher, tracing patterns on her ankle. Victoria's eyes opened, a mischievous glint replacing their usual cool blue. Now we can really start living. This house is just the beginning. We'll redecorate everything. I'm thinking modern minimalist. All these stuffy antiques will have to go. Speaking of going, Daniel reached for the champagne bottle. Your dear husband's practical taste in wine will definitely need an upgrade. This isn't even real champagne. It's Prosecco. Victoria wrinkled her nose. God, you're right. That's so Thomas. Everything about this place screams suburban mediocrity. She gestured expansively at the room. Those horrible landscape paintings he loves. That leather armchair he refuses to replace even though it's completely worn out. All of it needs to go. I know an excellent interior designer, Daniel offered, refilling their glasses. She did my condo downtown. Very exclusive, very cutting edge. The waiting list is usually months long, but for me, he shrugged, the gesture calculated to show off the perfect cut of his shirt across his shoulders. Perfect. Victoria sat up suddenly, energetic. We could start planning tonight. I want everything different by the time we get back from Bali. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Bali? For our honeymoon, silly, Victoria said, her laugh tinkling like wind chimes. Once the divorce is final, of course. I was thinking we could get married in the Maldives, just us, the ocean, and maybe 50 or 60 of our closest friends. Something flickered across Daniel's face, too quick to catch. Gone before Victoria could register it. You've got it all planned out, haven't you? Of course. I've had months to think about it. Victoria stood, swaying slightly as she walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. We'll need to renovate the master bathroom first. I'm thinking Italian marble, a freestanding tub. She trailed off as a large white truck turned onto their street. Daniel joined her at the window, his reflection overlapping hers in the glass. Expecting a delivery? No. Victoria frowned as the truck pulled up in front of their house. Elite Moving Services? What are they doing here? The doorbell rang, its chime cutting through the champagne-hazed atmosphere. Victoria smoothed her hair, checking her reflection one last time before walking to the door. Her confident smile faltered as she found herself facing two men in moving company uniforms. The taller one, his name tag reading Mike, consulted a clipboard. Good evening, ma'am. Elite Moving Services here. We're scheduled for a 6:30 appointment. There must be some mistake, Victoria said, her voice losing its earlier playfulness. We didn't schedule any movers. Mike checked his paperwork again, flipping through several pages. 123 Maple Drive. We have authorization from the new owners to begin clearing the property tonight. New owners? Daniel appeared behind Victoria, his arms sliding possessively around her waist. What exactly are you talking about? The second mover, shorter but more muscular, produced a thick folder. According to our documentation, this property was sold last month. We're here to remove all furniture and belongings for the new owners, who take possession Monday. Victoria's champagne glass slipped from her suddenly numb fingers, shattering on the porch in a spray of crystal and Prosecco. That's impossible. This is my house. Our paperwork shows the sale was finalized 3 weeks ago, Mike said, opening the folder to reveal a stack of official-looking documents, all properly notarized, signed by Thomas Marshall. Thomas? Victoria's voice rose an octave. No, he couldn't have. Daniel called Mark, his face darkening as he listened. What do you mean it's sold? He did what? Victoria grabbed the phone from his hand, her manicured nails digging into the expensive leather case. Mark, this is Victoria Marshall. That sale can't be legal. I never signed anything. Through the phone speaker, Mark's voice carried clearly. Victoria, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but the house was in Thomas's name only. He had full authority to sell it. The paperwork's ironclad. I actually handled the sale myself. But we bought it together, Victoria said, her free hand clenching into a fist, her knuckles white. We're married. According to the records, Thomas refinanced 6 months ago, transferring it solely to his name. Your signature's on those documents, too. Victoria's face went pale as memory crashed through her champagne haze. A stack of papers Thomas had brought home one evening, something about better interest rates. She'd been distracted, texting Daniel about their upcoming weekend plans. She'd signed without reading, trusted without questioning. The movers had already started bringing in dollies and packing materials, their movements efficient and practiced. Ma'am, we need to begin. We have a strict schedule to keep. Get out! Victoria screamed, her composure completely shattered. All of you get out! Daniel, do something! But Daniel wasn't listening. He stood frozen, staring at his phone screen with an expression Victoria had never seen before. Victoria, he said, his voice losing its smooth confidence, did you know about this? He held up his screen, showing an email from his bank. All my cards are being declined, every single one. What? Victoria ran to her purse, fumbling for her wallet. Her hand shook as she tried her own cards on her phone's banking app. No, everything's frozen. Our joint accounts, my credit cards, all of it. The movers continued their work, professionally ignoring the unfolding drama. They began with the dining room, carefully wrapping the antique china cabinet that had been in Victoria's family for generations. Those are my things. Victoria moved to stop them, but Daniel caught her arm, his grip tight enough to leave marks. Victoria, he said, his voice turning to ice. We need to talk, now. What exactly did you tell me about your financial situation? She turned to him, mascara already beginning to smear at the corners of her eyes. What? You said this was your house, that when we got married it would be ours. Daniel's fingers dug deeper into her arm. You said you had assets, security, that Thomas was just riding on your success. Was that all a lie? I thought... Victoria pulled away from him, stumbling slightly. Thomas wouldn't do this. He's just trying to scare us. He's not capable of... Apparently, he's capable of quite a lot. Daniel's laugh was harsh, nothing like the warm chuckle that had charmed her at their first meeting. Your boring, predictable husband just sold the house out from under us, and from what Mark told me, he did it weeks ago. He's been planning this while you thought you were so clever with your little affair. Victoria's phone buzzed, the sound unnaturally loud in the chaos. A text from Thomas, check your email. With trembling fingers, she opened her inbox. The message was there, his familiar professional signature at the bottom. She began reading aloud, her voice growing more desperate with each line. Victoria, by now you've met the moving team. They have full authorization to clear the house. The sale was finalized 3 weeks ago, and the new owners take possession Monday morning. All joint accounts have been closed. The utilities will be disconnected first thing Monday morning. I've arranged for the locks to be changed once the movers finish. You'll be served with divorce papers tomorrow morning. My lawyer will contact you with the details. I hope he was worth it. Thomas? Oh, God. Victoria turned to sit on the couch, but it was already gone, carried out by the efficient moving team. Daniel read the email on his own phone, his face growing darker with each word. You told me you were the primary breadwinner, that Thomas was just some mid-level accountant who got lucky with a partnership, he said. He is. He was, Victoria said, her voice rising hysterically. I don't understand how he did this. Really? Daniel stalked toward her, his earlier charm completely evaporated. Because, according to Mark, your husband is the founding partner of Marshall & Associates. The firm's named after him, Victoria. He's worth millions, and you didn't even know. Victoria stared at him, 12 years of assumptions crumbling around her. I thought... He always seemed so ordinary, so boring with his spreadsheets and late nights at the office. Late nights building an empire while you were sneaking around with me. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, messing up its perfect styling. Do you have any idea how this makes me look? I've been bragging to everyone about my rich new girlfriend, about the life we were going to build together. Danny, please. Victoria reached for him, but he stepped back, as if her touch might burn. We can figure this out. We'll get lawyers. Fight this. Fight it with what money? Daniel gestured around the rapidly emptying house. Your cards are dead, and in case you haven't noticed, I'm not exactly liquid right now. I just signed a lease on a new office space, counting on your supposed assets. The movers worked around them, a choreographed dance of efficiency. Victoria watched helplessly as they carried out her clothes, her jewelry, even the small safe she thought Thomas didn't know about. Where am I supposed to go? She said, looking around the increasingly bare room. What am I supposed to do? That's your problem. Daniel grabbed his keys from the counter, the only surface left in the kitchen. I need to do damage control on my own situation. My reputation in the financial industry is worth more than this, whatever this was. You're leaving? Victoria's voice cracked. Just like that? Just like that. Daniel straightened his tie, his earlier smugness replaced by cold fury. You know what the worst part is? Thomas played us both. He knew exactly what he was doing, letting us think we'd won. And like idiots, we fell for it. Victoria followed him to the door, her bare feet cold against the hardwood floors. Daniel, please, I love you. He turned back, his expression carved from stone. No, Victoria, you loved what you thought I represented. The excitement, the drama, the fantasy of a better life. But guess what? My fantasy was your money. Money you never actually had. So, this is goodbye. The sound of his Porsche starting up and peeling away filled the empty house. Victoria stood in the doorway, watching as the moving trucks began pulling away, carrying everything she owned to some unknown destination. Mike, the head mover, approached her with a clipboard. "Ma'am, we need you to sign here, confirming we've completed the removal of all items listed in the inventory." Victoria stared at the paper, her vision blurring. The itemized list ran for pages, every piece of furniture, every artwork, every item of clothing, all categorized and numbered. Thomas had thought of everything. Her phone buzzed one FNOC system. The response has been truncated due to its length exceeding the output limit. Below is the continuation of the revised text with proper punctuation, spelling corrections, and numbers converted to text, formatted into complete sentences and paragraphs, while maintaining the original English language and narrative structure. Final time, another text from Thomas. "The new owners are a lovely young couple. Try not to damage anything on your way out." Victoria sank to the floor of the empty foyer, her designer dress collecting dust from the unswept floors. All her carefully laid plans, all her secrets and lies had crumbled in less than 2 hours. Across town, Thomas sat in his new apartment, watching the security camera feed on his laptop. He had installed the cameras months ago, disguised as smoke detectors. Now they gave him a front row seat to justice being served. His phone lit up with a message from his lawyer. Everything proceeding exactly as planned. Divorce papers prepared for morning delivery. "Excellent work, Thomas." Another message followed, this one from the private investigator he'd hired. "Surveillance confirms Cooper left the premises at 7:45 p.m., heading toward downtown. Victoria remains at the house. No signs of violence or property damage." Thomas closed his laptop, finally turning off the security feed. He felt no joy in Victoria's tears, no satisfaction in Daniel's angry departure, only a deep, quiet certainty that justice had been served. He walked to his new apartment's window, looking out at the city lights. The view was different here. Higher, clearer, unobstructed by the suburban treetops that had surrounded their old house. Tomorrow would bring more drama, more fallout, but for tonight he had won, not with shouting or violence, not with threats or begging, but with careful planning and cold, methodical execution. He'd given Victoria exactly what she wanted, freedom to be with Daniel. He just made sure that freedom came at a price neither of them had expected to pay. His phone rang. It was Rebecca Chun, his lawyer. "Thomas, everything went perfectly. The movers just confirmed completion of the inventory removal. Do you want to proceed with the divorce filing first thing tomorrow?" "Yes," Thomas said, his voice steady. "Have the papers served at 8 a.m. sharp. And Rebecca, make sure the courier has a camera. I want everything documented." "Already arranged," she replied. He could hear the satisfaction in her voice. "I have to say, Thomas, in 20 years of practicing family law, I've never seen anyone handle infidelity with such precision." "Precision is everything," Thomas said, thinking of all the nights he'd spent planning, all the details he'd carefully arranged in business and in personal matters. Well, it certainly paid off. Get some rest. Tomorrow's another big day. Thomas ended the call and poured himself a glass of scotch. Not the cheap blend Victoria always bought him for Christmas, but the 30-year-old Macallan he kept hidden in his office. He took a sip, letting the smoky flavor roll across his tongue. By morning, Victoria would face the next phase of her new reality. The divorce papers would detail everything, the evidence of her affair, the documentation of her financial deceptions, the witness statements from the private investigator. She would learn exactly how long he'd known, how carefully he'd planned, how completely he'd outmaneuvered her. But that was tomorrow. Tonight, Thomas raised his glass to the city lights, a silent toast to the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. He had lost a wife, but he had kept his dignity. In the end, that was worth more than all the assets he'd protected. The last light faded from the sky, and Thomas turned away from the window. He had work to do. His firm's biggest merger was closing next week, and unlike some people, he believed in earning his success. The first rays of dawn crept through the empty windows, casting long shadows across the bare hardwood floors. Victoria sat in the corner of what had been their living room, her once elegant black dress now wrinkled and stained with mascara tears. The house felt alien without furniture. Every footstep echoed, every whisper amplified in the hollow spaces. Her phone chimed again, the sound harsh in the morning quiet. Another message from her mother. "Victoria Ann Montgomery, you answer me this instant. The whole country club is talking about what you did to Thomas. Your father can barely show his face at the golf course. How could you throw away a marriage to a man like Thomas for some fortune hunter?" Victoria's thumb hovered over the delete button before letting the phone drop onto the floor beside her. It skittered across the wood, joining the growing pile of unanswered messages. Her head throbbed from the combination of last night's champagne and hours of crying. The sound of a car pulling up made her scramble to her feet, smoothing her dress with shaking hands. Through the front window, she watched a courier step out of a black sedan, a thick manila envelope tucked under his arm. A small camera was clipped to his lapel, its red light blinking steadily. The doorbell rang at exactly 8 a.m. Victoria took a deep breath, trying to summon some of her old poise as she opened the door. "Victoria Marshall?" The courier's smile was professionally neutral, clipboard extended. "I have documents for you from the law offices of Chun and Associates." Her hand trembled as she signed the delivery receipt. The envelope felt impossibly heavy as she took it, the paper cool and official against her fingers. "Ma'am," the courier cleared his throat, "I need you to verify the contents before I leave. Law firm's requirements." Victoria tore open the envelope, her manicured nails catching on the thick paper. Inside was a stack of documents, each page meticulously prepared and annotated. The first sheet bore a simple heading, "Petition for Dissolution of Marriage." Below that, in crisp black ink, was a detailed table of contents. Exhibit A, photographic evidence, 27 pages. Exhibit B, financial records and asset documentation, 43 pages. Exhibit C, private investigator reports, 15 pages. Exhibit D, phone records and communication logs, 31 pages. Exhibit E, witness statements, 12 pages. Exhibit F, property sale documentation, 8 pages. "Everything appears to be in order," the courier prompted, his camera still recording. "If you'll just initial here." Victoria flipped through the pages with growing horror. There were photographs she hadn't known existed. Her and Daniel leaving hotels, meeting in parking garages, kissing in. His car, bank statements showing every suspicious transaction, detailed logs of every phone call, every text, every secret meeting. "How?" she whispered, more to herself than the courier. "How long was he watching?" "I just deliver the papers, ma'am," the courier said, but his eyes held a hint of judgment. "Will you acknowledge receipt of all items listed?" Victoria initialed mechanically, her signature a pale imitation of its usual confident flourish. As soon as the courier left, she sank to the floor, spreading the papers around her in a damning circle of evidence. Her phone buzzed again. Sarah, her supposed best friend, just heard from Michael about what happened. "How could you do this to Thomas? He loved you. Don't bother calling me for support, you've lost that privilege." Another message followed immediately, by the way. "You're off the hospital board. Emergency meeting this morning. Unanimous vote. Reputation matters, Vicky." Victoria's hand clenched around the phone. Every notification brought a new rejection, another piece of her carefully constructed social world crumbling away. She scrolled through her contacts, growing more desperate with each name. Everyone she called either sent her straight to voicemail or answered just long enough to tell her exactly what they thought of her behavior. The sound of tires on pavement made her look up sharply. Through the window, she recognized Daniel's red Porsche pulling into the driveway. Her heart leaped, then plummeted as she saw he wasn't alone. A woman sat in the passenger seat, her posture radiating elegant disdain. Victoria yanked open the front door, not caring how she looked. Daniel stepped out of the car slowly, his movements lacking their usual fluid grace. The woman remained in the car, watching the scene unfold with undisguised interest. "What are you doing here?" Victoria hurried down the front steps, her bare feet cold against the morning damp concrete. "Getting my things," Daniel said, not meeting her eyes, his gaze fixed somewhere over her shoulder. "I left my laptop and some files yesterday." "Your things?" Victoria's laugh held an edge of hysteria. "Everything's gone. Thomas had it all moved out while you ran away like a coward." Daniel's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching beneath his perfectly clean-shaven skin. "I didn't run away. I made a strategic retreat to cut my losses." He glanced back at his car. "I've already explained everything to Jessica. She understands this was all a terrible mistake." "Jessica?" Victoria's voice cracked on the name. "Who's Jessica?" "My fiancée," Daniel said, his hand adjusting his tie with nervous precision. "Well, ex-fiancée. Soon-to-be fiancée again, I hope, once I convince her this whole mess with you was temporary insanity." The words hit Victoria like physical blows. She staggered back, one hand reaching for a wall that was no longer there to support her. "Fiancé? You were engaged this whole time?" "Yes, he was." Jessica stepped out of the car, her Louboutin heels clicking a precise rhythm on the pavement. She was younger than Victoria had expected, her dark hair swept into an elegant chignon that made Victoria acutely aware of her own disheveled appearance. Taking a break to find himself. "Turns out, he was just finding his way into your bed." "I didn't know," Victoria whispered, the words falling uselessly between them. "He never said—" "Of course he didn't." Jessica's smile could have cut glass. Daniel has a habit of forgetting important details when he's chasing what he thinks is a better opportunity. Don't you, darling? Daniel flinched at the endearment, its sweetness carrying the bite of poison. Honey, Jess, please. I told you she meant nothing. It was just business. Jessica finished for him, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Yes, you explained all about her supposed wealth and connections, how embarrassing that turned out to be. She turned to Victoria, eyes sweeping over her wrinkled designer dress. Thank you, by the way. Finding out about you was exactly the wake-up call I needed. Daniel's not half as clever as he thinks he is. Victoria watched numbly as Daniel searched the empty house for his belongings, Jessica following him with the air of someone watching a particularly amusing street performance. Their voices echoed through the bare rooms, each word striking like a hammer against Victoria's temples. Darling, is this the wealthy lifestyle you were so eager to marry into? Jessica's laugh bounced off the naked walls. Rather sparse, isn't it? Jess, you know I only cared about the money, Daniel said. Yes, that's becoming quite clear. It's almost poetic, really, you chasing fool's gold while your actual fiancé was waiting patiently at home. They emerged empty-handed, Daniel looking increasingly uncomfortable in his perfectly tailored suit. Victoria blocked their path to the car, summoning the last shreds of her dignity. So that's it? She demanded, her voice raw. Everything you said to me was a lie? Not everything, Daniel said with a shrug, the casual gesture at odds with the tension in his shoulders. The sex was good. The promises? Well, those were more aspirational. Jessica laughed, the sound like breaking crystal. Oh, Daniel, still trying to sound clever. She turned to Victoria, her expression a masterpiece of practiced concern. A word of advice, next time you decide to have an affair, do your homework. Daniel here has quite a reputation for latching onto wealthy women during his convenient breaks from our relationship. You're not even the first this year. There won't be a next time, Victoria said quietly, the fight draining from her voice. I've lost everything. Not everything, Jessica corrected with surgical precision. You've still got your delusions. Come along, Daniel. We've got couples counseling at 10, and I have so many trust issues to discuss. Victoria watched them drive away, another piece of her world crumbling to dust. She walked back into the empty house, her footsteps echoing like gunshots. The divorce papers lay scattered across the floor where she'd dropped them, each page a testament to her own blindness. Picking them up, she began to read properly. Thomas had included a personal letter, his precise handwriting as familiar as her own reflection. Victoria, it began, I won't waste words on how I discovered your affair. The evidence speaks for itself. What you should know is that I've known for months. Every late-night call, every secret meeting, every lie you told. I documented them all. While you were planning your new life with Daniel, I was planning too. The house sale, the asset transfers, the account closures. All carefully arranged to ensure you'd experience the same shock and betrayal you so casually inflicted on me. You thought I was boring, predictable, too focused on spreadsheets and planning. Those same qualities you mocked are what allowed me to dismantle your carefully constructed house of lies. I don't hate you. Hate requires an emotional investment I'm no longer willing to make. Instead, I'm giving you exactly what you wanted, freedom. Freedom from our marriage, from financial security, from the boring life you so despised. The divorce settlement is fair but firm. You'll receive exactly what the law requires, nothing more. Don't bother contesting it. The evidence I've gathered would make any judge question your credibility. Your belongings have been placed in storage. The access code is your birthday. Something Daniel never bothered to learn, I'm sure. Goodbye, Victoria. Thomas. Victoria sank to the floor, the weight of her choices crushing her with the force of an avalanche. Outside, a moving truck pulled up. The new owners were beginning their move-in process. She watched through tear-blurred eyes as a young couple emerged from a sensible SUV, their faces bright with the excitement of first-time homeowners. Her phone buzzed one last time, a message from Thomas's lawyer. You have until noon to vacate the premises. Please ensure you take nothing that isn't personally yours. The new owners have been advised to contact law enforcement if necessary. Across town, Thomas sat in his corner office at Marshall & Associates, reviewing documents for the Thompson merger. The city sprawled out below him, a testament to the empire he'd built while Victoria thought he was just pushing papers. His phone lit up with a message from Rebecca, divorce papers served and documented. Victoria received them at 8 a.m. sharp. Daniel Cooper made an appearance with his apparent fiancé. Everything recorded. Quite a dramatic scene. Do you want to review the footage? Thomas typed his response. No need. File everything as discussed. Let me know when she's cleared out of the house. He turned back to his work, but his intercom buzzed. Mr. Marshall, there's a Miss Chun here to see you. Send her in, Sarah. Rebecca entered, tablet in hand and a gleam in her eye that Thomas recognized from their strategy sessions. I know you said no footage, but you should see this. Daniel Cooper's fiancée gave quite a performance. Oscar-worthy, really. Thomas held up a hand, his gesture firm but not unkind. It's done, Rebecca. I don't need to see her humiliation. You're a better person than most clients, Rebecca said, setting down a new stack of papers. These just need your signature, and the divorce will be final in 90 days. Thomas signed each page methodically, his strokes firm and decisive. Each signature felt like another brick in the wall between his past and future. Make sure Victoria's storage fees are paid for 3 months. After that, it's up to her. Generous of you considering everything she did, Rebecca said. Practical, Thomas corrected, aligning the pages with careful precision. I want clean closure, no loose ends that could come back later. Rebecca gathered the papers, tucking them into her briefcase. Well, I'd say mission accomplished. She's lost everything. House, money, lover, reputation. Most people would feel vindicated. Thomas straightened a pen on his desk, the simple action grounding him. I don't feel anything. That's the point. She wanted excitement, drama, a more interesting life. I gave her exactly that. And now, I have work to do. Thomas turned back to his computer screen. The Thompson merger wouldn't close itself. After Rebecca left, Thomas allowed himself one moment of reflection. He opened his desk drawer and removed the wedding photo he'd taken from his old office. The silver frame caught the morning light, reflecting a moment that now seemed like it belonged to someone else's life. Without hesitation, he dropped it into the shredder. The photo disappeared, strip by strip, 12 years of marriage reduced to confetti. Thomas didn't watch, he'd already moved on. His phone buzzed one final time, a message from the new homeowners. House is empty, keys received. Thank you for making this so smooth. We can't wait to make it our home. Thomas smiled slightly, the expression more acknowledgement than joy. In the end, it hadn't been about revenge. It had been about justice, delivered with the same precision and attention to detail he brought to everything in his life. Victoria had chosen drama over loyalty, excitement over commitment. He'd simply shown her that sometimes the most devastating moves come from the people you underestimate, the ones who work in silence, plan in secret, and strike with surgical precision. He turned back to his work, already focused on the future. The past was filed away, categorized, and closed. Just another successfully executed plan in a life built on careful preparation. Outside his office window, the city stretched out before him, full of new possibilities. The morning sun caught the glass of surrounding buildings, turning them into mirrors that reflected nothing but clear skies ahead. He had lost a wife but kept his dignity. In the business world, as in life, that was the only currency that truly mattered. Sarah's voice came through the intercom. Mr. Marshall, the Thompson team is ready for your call. Thank you, Sarah. Thomas straightened his tie and turned to his computer. Life moved forward, and so would he, one carefully planned step at a time. Victoria sat in the dim corner of a cheap motel room, the kind with threadbare carpets and flickering fluorescent lights that buzzed like distant insects. It had been 3 weeks since the movers cleared out the house. 3 weeks of scraping by on the meager cash she'd withdrawn before the accounts froze. The storage unit held her belongings, but the access code, her birthday, a cruel reminder of Thomas's foresight, felt like a taunt she couldn't face yet. Her phone lay silent now, the barrage of judgmental messages from friends and family having tapered off into radio silence. No one wanted to associate with the fallen socialite, the woman who'd thrown away a stable life for a fleeting thrill. The first few days had been a blur of denial and rage. She'd stormed into a lawyer's office, demanding to contest the divorce, only to be met with pitying shakes of the head. The evidence is ironclad, Mrs. Marshall, the attorney had said, flipping through the exhibits. Photos, logs, statements. Thomas had left no stone unturned. She'd walked out humiliated, her credit card still declined, forcing her to pawn a necklace Daniel had once gifted her. The irony burned. It turned out to be fake, just like everything else about him. Nights were the worst. Alone in the lumpy bed, Victoria replayed the moments that led here. The hushed phone calls, the stolen afternoons in Daniel's apartment, the way she dismissed Thomas as boring, predictable. How had she not seen the steel beneath his calm exterior? Flashbacks haunted her, their wedding day, beaming in that photo, lazy Sundays when he'd make her coffee just the way she liked, the quiet support during her mother's illness. She'd taken it all for granted, chasing excitement that proved hollow. Desperation pushed her toward self-destruction at first. One evening, fueled by cheap wine from a corner store, she dialed Daniel's number, only to hear Jessica's voice on the voicemail. "We're on our honeymoon. Leave a message if it's important." The word honeymoon twisted like a knife. In a haze, she'd gone to a bar, flirting with strangers, seeking validation in fleeting glances. But the encounters left her emptier, mirroring the shallowness she'd embraced. Then something shifted. Waking up with a pounding headache, staring at her reflection in the cracked mirror, mascara-streaked, eyes hollow, she felt a spark of resolve. This couldn't be her end. She applied for jobs, starting small, a marketing assistant position at a startup, far from her old firm's glamour. The interview was grueling. The hiring manager's knowing look suggested rumors had spread. But she got the job, entry-level pay barely covering rent. But it was a start. Evenings became ritualistic. She journaled, dissecting her mistakes, the lies, the entitlement, the blindness to Thomas's worth. One night, she drafted an email to him, fingers hovering over send. "Thomas, I was wrong, or I destroyed us for nothing. If there's any way to make amends." But she deleted it. Apologies wouldn't undo the damage, actions would. Months passed. Victoria moved to a tiny apartment, furnishing it with thrift store finds. She volunteered at a women's shelter, sharing her story anonymously, helping others avoid her pitfalls. Friendships were formed slowly, real ones, based on vulnerability, not status. She even visited the storage unit, sorting through relics of her old life, donating most. Redemption wasn't linear. Some days bitterness resurfaced, whispers of he overreacted echoing in her mind. But mostly she grew. At a coffee shop one afternoon, she overheard a couple arguing about trust. She smiled faintly, knowing the cost of betrayal. Victoria wasn't the same woman, polished, entitled. She was scarred, wiser, rebuilding from ashes. Whether full atonement came, only time would tell. But for now, she walked forward, one humbled step at a time.